Hi, I'm Dave. Let me start with a question. Have you ever been told that you're too sensitive? Maybe you cry at the drop of a hat, or you get excited so quickly that people around you don't understand how big those feelings hit you. For me, growing up often felt like I was trapped inside a storm. Sudden waves of happiness, deep drops of sadness, quick flashes of anger, all arriving without much warning. My emotions weren't small ripples, they were full tidal waves. That storm has a name: emotional dysregulation. It's one of the most powerful ways ADHD shows up in people's lives. But here's the strange part. If you open the DSM, the manual doctors use to diagnose ADHD, you won't find emotional dysregulation anywhere in the description. You'll see inattention, impulsivity, hyperactivity, but emotional regulation, it's invisible. And yet for many of us, it feels like the very heart of ADHD. So how did something this obvious get left out? To answer that, we need to take a quick step back in time. ADHD isn't a new concept. In fact, descriptions of ADHD-like behavior appear as far back as the 1700s. For decades, emotional struggles were always included as part of the condition. But then came the 1970s. During that period, researchers wanted to tighten the focus. They wanted ADHD defined only by what could be measured in a lab, and emotions, being messy and harder to quantify, were pushed aside. When the first official DSM definition of ADHD was released, emotions were already missing. Even when later studies kept proving that emotional dysregulation was real, it was too late to wedge it back in. Fast forward to today, and the story is different. We now understand that ADHD is deeply tied to the way our brains process and regulate emotions. Whether or not the DSM ever updates its definition, science has made it clear. Emotional dysregulation is a core piece of the ADHD experience. So let's talk about what that really means. People with ADHD don't feel different emotions compared to everyone else. If someone insults you, you'll feel upset, just like anybody would. The difference is in intensity and duration. ADHD emotions can hit harder, last longer, and be harder to bring back down. And that's because ADHD brains have trouble with regulation, not with the emotions themselves. Regulation is the set of tools your brain uses to calm down, to reset, and to make thoughtful choices in heated moments. But emotional regulation isn't one simple skill. It's actually a four-step process. Step 1, inhibition. This is the ability to pause before reacting. For most people, that pause gives them a chance to think. But if you already struggle with impulsivity, as many ADHDers do, that pause often disappears. Emotions burst out before logic has a chance to catch up. Step 2, self-soothing. Once that wave of emotion hits, can you calm it down? Some people meditate, others take a breath, some go for a walk. But when you have ADHD, self-soothing often falls into extremes. Sometimes the strategies we choose aren't helpful at all, like snapping back at someone instantly, binge-watching to escape, or reaching for comfort foods. Step 3, refocusing. This means pulling your attention away from the emotional trigger and redirecting it to something else. And let's be honest, for an ADHD brain, refocusing attention is basically one of the hardest things to do. When emotions lock us in, breaking free feels almost impossible. Step 4, goal-directed response. This is the big one. It's about choosing an action that lines up with what actually matters in the long run. To do that, you'd need to recall what your goals are. Remember how things turned out the last time you responded in a similar way. Consider all the moving pieces in this specific situation, and then predict possible outcomes before making your choice. That's a lot of mental juggling. And when emotions are running hot, it can be overwhelming. Now, when this process breaks down, it doesn't just affect anger or frustration. It spills over into every emotion. Take sadness. A small disappointment can send us spiraling into hopelessness for days. Or excitement. Maybe you're working on a project that's due tomorrow. Suddenly, a friend texts you, and the joy of that interaction completely hijacks your attention. 5 hours later, the project is untouched, even though you know it matters. Even happiness can backfire when it pulls us away from priorities we care about. So let's ask an important question. Is emotional dysregulation always bad? Personally, I don't think so. I actually love that I feel things intensely. It makes me passionate, alive, and deeply connected to others. When I'm around people with ADHD, I notice that same spark. We're animated, curious, and expressive. It can make us exciting and creative companions. Intense feelings aren't just chaos. They're also a fuel for connection and innovation. But of course, the flip side is that emotions can easily run the show, dragging us away from our goals and straining our relationships. So what can we do about it? The first step is simply awareness. Many of us go through life reacting without stopping to notice what's happening inside us. But if you start to track your emotions, you can begin to see patterns. One way to do this is with an emotion log. After After a strong reaction, take a moment later to write down what triggered it, what you felt, how you responded, and what the results were. The key here is no judgment, just curiosity. For example, when I ignored studying, I felt guilty later. Every time my boss comments on my lateness, I lash out. When I offered to buy donuts, I ended up overeating. Pretty soon, patterns emerge. You'll notice the situations where your reactions consistently trip you up, and that awareness itself creates space. A pause where you might respond differently next time. That's where mindfulness comes in. Mindfulness isn't about becoming calm all the time. It's about noticing what you feel as you feel it, and creating just enough space to choose how to act instead of being swept away. Research shows mindfulness practices can help ADHD brains slow the emotional storm long enough to steer in a better direction. Now, emotional dysregulation doesn't look the same for everyone. What sets me off might not affect you in the same way. And when emotions are causing serious disruption in your life, professional help can make a huge difference. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, is especially effective. It teaches skills for noticing, reframing, and responding differently when your emotions are running high. So if you've ever wondered why your feelings sometimes feel bigger, louder, or harder to control than those of the people around you, now you know. It's not weakness. It's not just being overly sensitive. It's part of how ADHD shapes the brain's ability to regulate. And the best part? With awareness, strategies, and practice, you can get better at it. Emotional dysregulation doesn't have to control your life. It's something you can learn to manage step by step. I'm Dave, and I'll see you in the next one.